Karen Basra, who is from the Better Business Act. Thank you very much for joining us, Karen. And Heather and Caroline from Be Ethical Training, and Joe Grubb from JG Creative. Karen's going to talk to us about the Better Business Act. And if you've not heard of the BBA, it really is something that can change the way we do business and therefore all of our lives. I'm passionate about it and I'll get my opportunity to speak. But if you've got any comments or questions, please put your comments in the chat. We will have a Q&A session at the end, so we will address your questions. But if there are pertinent comments or questions, we'll be flexible enough to talk about those as we go through. So without further ado, Karen, welcome to sunny Cheshire.
Hey, thanks for having me, Donna. It's great to be in Cheshire, albeit virtually. So I've got a few, so just to introduce myself very quickly, I'm the Better Business Act sort of advocacy lead. So that means I've been kind of working with the campaign to go out and talk to parliamentarians, to go and sort of make what is at the moment a proposal, a piece of legislation. So I'll just share with you a little bit about the Act. And I've got a few slides here. When me and Donna were sort of planning the session earlier, we talked about death by PowerPoint. So I don't want to spend a huge amount of time on this presentation, and I'm conscious that people have a lot of these. But let me just kind of rattle through these quickly and give you a sense of what the Better Business Act is exactly. I'm just going to share my screen now. And you should be able to see that. Great. So I think a really exciting title here for today's session, you know, could Cheshire be the better business capital of the UK? I think that's a great title. I can't remember the exact number, but there's thousands and thousands of businesses across what is a kind of beautiful part of England, and you know, could have a transformational effect if they were all to become signatories of the Better Business Act. So let's get into exactly what that means and what that looks like. So kind of the short form narrative, you know, what we're aiming for here is to change UK company law to make sure that all companies, regardless of size, so everywhere from the biggest players all the way down to kind of small SMEs, mar and par operations, corner shops, that sort of thing, really put into effect this triple bottom line approach of balancing people, planet and profit, and put that at the heart of their duties. And those of you who are familiar with company law will know that, you know, directors' duties, fiduciary duties, is something that sit within Section 172 of the Companies Act. So that's, you know, in the shortest form, in sort of a few words, what we're aiming to do with the Better Business Act. And I guess the key question is, why are we trying to do that? So I've just put together a few stats here, which I think are fairly kind of illustrative of kind of where public attitude is. So if you look across all three of those, roughly about 3/4 of people, slightly less, slightly more in the case of the specific stats, think that businesses ought to have a legal responsibility for the planet and people alongside profit maximisation. Think that businesses ought to have a responsibility to protect the natural environment, and think that capitalism isn't working properly or is harmful. So the Better Business Act is really a response to those concerns emanated from the public, and in many ways a kind of legislative answer to those. So what we're looking to do here is really have business at its best, and it's an attempt to realise what businesses can do when they realise their full potential. So we'll get into this a little bit later, but the campaign really began, you know, just sort of back in January, and was really fomented when we were in the midst of a kind of pandemic, and I think that gave rise to a lot of these feelings about the idea that capitalism isn't working for a lot of people. So these kind of fed into a whole range of principles, which I think are here. And actually, I think this is the beauty of the campaign, and what we're trying to do is, yeah, okay, so I put it in a paragraph earlier, but if you just kind of take it out a little bit and expand a little bit, there are really only 4 principles behind what we're trying to achieve here. So the first and most important one is that we want to move from a situation where shareholder primacy is altered in favour of a new set of fiduciary duties where society and the environment are put on a level playing field, really. So directors have to align those interests. The second principle here is that really it's for directors to do, and directors need to be empowered to be able to make up their own decisions around how they do that. The third is that, this is a default change. So it's all businesses, it's not just listed businesses, it's not just businesses over a certain threshold, but it is all businesses. And I think, to recall what I said earlier, we want every single business, whether big or small, to be pulling its weight. And then finally, and this actually is where there's a bit more proportionality, is that this ought to be reflected in reporting. What we've said here is it's where companies are already required to file a strategic report. So I can't remember the exact thresholds at the moment, but it's, if you have a turnover over a certain amount, and they're quite large figures, and we can certainly share those afterwards. But those of you who do file strategic reports will know whether you're captured or not. But it certainly is sort of larger businesses there that are captured. So just to give you a sense of kind of where the campaign is, and I think clearly, look, this is a kind of nice, interesting idea, but it's, it's nothing unless it is made into law and translated into law. So we launched with a virtual parliamentary launch back in April, so back in the spring. And I say parliamentary launch, it was basically a Zoom call like this, like so many of our events have been in the recent past. But I think the key thing that we're trying to illustrate and get across with this slide is that it's really a cross-party effort. So, we had spokespeople from the Conservative Party, from the Lib Dems, the SNP, and the Greens, and Labour have also been supportive of the change. So there's people right across kind of all 3 major parties and the Greens who are supportive of the change that we're trying to make. I think my favourite quote there is from Caroline Lucas, who talks about this as a beautiful piece of legislation, which, I've never heard legislation described as beautiful, so that's quite a compliment. And I think actually what's quite nice about what we're doing, so we talked about those 4 principles, is that there's a draft proposal that's been put together. And again, Donna, I'm sure we can share that with everyone, but it really is just, it's one page, it's one piece of tight legal drafting that's been put together by lawyers at Bates Wells, a sort of city law firm. So yeah, a beautiful piece of legislation. Alongside kind of the work that we've been doing kind of in Parliament, we've been doing a lot of kind of media work. So that, again, was on the day of the launch. So that's Douglas Lamont, the campaign's co-chair, up on Sky News alongside Amy Clark, who's an impact investor and another member of the coalition, talking about the changes that we're trying to make. And it's not just sort of Sky News where we've had the campaign featured. So there's been letters in the Financial Times recently, coverage in the Daily Mail, also in the Telegraph. So there's been a degree of kind of cutting across, and hopefully some of you will have seen that coverage, and particularly those of you who are already signed up to the Act should be receiving emails with links to some of this coverage. But I only point to the coverage to give you a sense of the fact that, really this is cutting across, and what we're trying to do seems to be cutting across. Right, so this I think is probably the most exciting part. So this is how we make it happen. So, as I said, we started off back in April, and we brought together kind of experts. And actually, I didn't mention at the parliamentary launch, we also had the Trade Union Congress and the Institute directors, who are both supportive in their own way. And I think, again, that's quite powerful because it shows sort of Labour, organised Labour rather, coming together with with business and sort of saying, look, we all agree that a change needs to happen. There's been some quite sort of boring technical bits and pieces as well along the way. So government consultations on audit and corporate governance that we've submitted to. And then over the summer, and as I said, I think this really is the most exciting part. We had lots of supporters out going and talking to their local MPs and getting them on board and signed up to the Act, including Donna, who met with Edward Timpson, who I know is her neighbour, her next door neighbour, and managed to get him on board with the Act. So that's all very exciting. And then most recently, we had sort of party conferences. So big sort of contingents of the BBA team down in Brighton in September at Labour Party conference, so with fringe events and things like that, engaging with the Labour front bench, but then also up in Manchester for Tory Party conference, where actually we launched a collection of essays as well with a whole group of Tory MPs submitting to that. So hopefully that gives you a sense of just how cross-party what we're doing is. And then obviously the kind of orange bit is running up to the next steps, and that's the Queen's speech. So that's in May, and our aim and our objective now is to get the Better Business Act on the statute books and have the Queen announce it, or at least announce something that looks a bit like the Better Business Act that we can work on and amend in the months after that. And so what that orange involves is a lot more visits, a lot more supporters, and a lot more talking to MPs to make sure that this really happens. And finally, I just wanted to finish off with a slide of just giving you a sense of some of the supporters. Now, obviously, we've got 3 great businesses on the call who are supporters, and you're going to hear from them directly now. But there's also a huge number, so 850 coalition supporters, including the Institute of Directors, Investors in People, Virgin, Innocent, a whole host of named brands. Iceland, a kind of local business to the northwest, to Cheshire. Well, actually, I think just over the border in Wales, isn't it, actually? But I'm sure you can claim that as a Cheshire business if you wanted to. Sykes Holiday Cottages as well, who I know who are just next to Chester Station. So look, a really exciting bunch of businesses on board with the coalition. So hopefully that just gives you a little bit of a sense of what we're doing. I'll stop sharing my screen now, and hopefully we can hear directly from businesses about why they're supporting. So I'm going to turn to Heather first. So Heather, I know you've worked in responsible business for about a decade. You focus kind of primarily on stakeholder engagement, but also impact reporting. So a lot of the principles that we talked about earlier, that idea that what we do ought to be reflected in reporting, that we ought to be working with our stakeholders. And I know now that you work with kind of a whole portfolio of brands, trainees and events, and you're engaging with thousands of people across a whole kind of global platform. So it'd be great to hear a little bit about why Be Ethical Training, and hopefully Caroline, you can chip in as well, about kind of why Be Ethical Training signed up to the Better Business Act and what you see the Better Business Act achieving.
It was really an obvious fit for us.
Yeah.
We've been, as you said, doing corporate social responsibility for a number of years now. And although it has been on the agenda, it's never been on top of the agenda. And we felt that the BBA was just tackling that head on. Once it changed in legislation, you would see it being pushed in front of the board more. And that meant that the likes of myself and Caroline, who were in those CSR roles, were feeling like we were getting the support, the space, because I suppose in large organisation, it's the department that shouts the loudest sometimes, or the department that is making the most money that gets it. But that's what the BBA for us was changing. It was pushing it up the agenda. And then in regards to the work we're doing now with SMEs, it just seemed
they've got to sign this to understand that they're ahead of the game when things do change. So our SME portfolio, they're doing incredible things already. they're not measuring it and reporting it. They might not have to as part of the Better Business Act because they might not be big enough, but why not get ahead of the game and really get it clear from their perspective that, you know, this is how we are going to do business in the future. And we as small business can actually inform bigger businesses about why it's so important to be part of BBA. BBA should have 150,000, 200, 300, 400,000 signatures. We have to just take away a little bit of fear that it might cause them fines or it might cause them, you know, concerns in the future. So we hope that we can educate everyone we work with and take any fears and concerns away so that they are encouraged to sign the BBA.
Yeah, I definitely recommend on those fears and concerns, you have a great FAQ page on the website, which breaks that all down, and a lovely, beautiful legislation stood out to me as well, because when I opened that document, I went, oh, it's one page.
It's really just, easy to read. It doesn't make me stressed at all. And so by putting it on the agenda in the future for businesses, they'll be like, why wouldn't I? Why wouldn't I sign the act? And, you know, if we can reach far and wide across Cheshire, if we can only reach 500 people, then we'll ask them to reach another 5 each. And then we're getting there. We're going to move forward, you know, with some momentum. And that's what we want to be able to be part of.
Fantastic. And Caroline, I just noticed sort of in your biography that, you know, your background's kind of in family business, and I just wondered whether that sort of made a difference, and whether, you know, your experience in family business, because I think my sense going and talking to coalition supporters is a lot of family businesses have done this stuff organically anyway, and haven't really put a name to it, whereas I guess in bigger businesses it's been labeled kind of CSR or corporate responsibility, but actually my sense is, and I don't know whether this chimes with your experience, is that family businesses are just doing this stuff anyway.
Yeah, I think we just have to remove corporate, because they don't see themselves as anything to do with the corporate world. You know, anybody's in business is a corporate, you know, entity, but if you take that out of the mix, again, it's taking away, it's translating it into a relatable reason for being part of it. And the translation is so important, because the Better Business Act coalition could sound a little bit too down the legal side, and there might be an impact for them. So what we would do is ask them very, very relevant questions that relate to it, and then they've answered the question that they're going to sign it for themselves. So family businesses are absolutely doing all of this. They've always done it because it's part of their core sort of ethos and values and the culture of that organization. They've just never really structured it in a way that helps them see all the great things they're doing. So another thing we do is we help them see the great impact they're already having, and then it's like, you now need to sign the Better Business Act because you're already doing all of these things.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, and the idea that you're already doing it. So, you know, and I think that's something.
It's really authentic as well. When you speak to an MD of a family-owned business, you might have a team of 10, 20. That it's lovely to see, isn't it, when we start unpicking it? And, you know, they've gone through so much in the last 2 years. They're barely just coming out, you know, they barely survived it. So actually to be faced with off the back of COP26, the net zero pressure they're getting in the frameworks here and there and everywhere. And I just think the BBA have just simplified it in a way, and will do, to structure it that there's an overarching reporting framework. I know that's one of the key missions that you've got as well. So it just really sits with us as well as a business, for us as business owners, but also the training that we provide for SMEs. Once we facilitate the right questions, get them excited about what they're on, then put them on that journey to sign the BBA, because it's just so obvious. It's just a great fit for them.
And your education around it all, again, it's a simplified way of just sharing the great things that can be achieved in business, and then yourselves and we talk about the benefits of doing those things. So it's not just doing better business, it's probably going to make your business more efficient. It's going to make you more it might give you a competitive advantage, which means that in the long term you could be more profitable, which means that your profit has purpose. And this is the most important thing about business, that their profit has purpose. And we want that profit with purpose to be able to be distributed in a way that others benefit.
Thanks, Caroline. That's really interesting. I'd love to get into that discussion of the fact that, you know, actually businesses run on these principles often perform better, and we've got kind of evidence around that, and we can get into that in a little bit. But I'm keen to bring Jo into the conversation. So Joe, I mean, I know that your background is in kind of design and branding, and GJ Creative specializes in graphic design, particularly for the not-for-profit sector. So I just wondered whether, so charities are obviously a very specific kind of form, and BBA wouldn't necessarily apply to kind of non-profits because they're kind of distinct entities. I just wondered whether you did any work with kind of others, and actually, how as your own business, you're a for-profit making entity, and how that kind of interaction works, and whether something like the BBA would help kind of bridge that gap in some ways.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it like that. I mean, we're a family-owned business. We're a small business. Started out my mum and dad's back bedroom, hired my sister first. She's still working, sat next to me. And we're a branding agency. So we help other people, businesses, good businesses and charities work out who they are, their values. And we always say it's about being authentic. And actually the thing that shocked me when I went from working inside a charity to running my own business was that actually some companies aren't particularly ethical, and we'd get clients who'd been really treated badly by other organizations and other agencies, and I just really didn't like it. And I think the fact that I always wanted to be the agency that I wanted to hire when I was the other side of the fence, if you like, the one that didn't charge me for my own artwork and didn't do this and didn't do that. And I found that just by doing that, we got a really good reputation, and we got more business, and so we've always, we've not really shouted about that. And for me, the BBA, as soon as I read it, I was like, well, yes, this is exactly what we do, and this is exactly how we think every business should run. And so it was a nice way for us to start to kind of say externally, this is how we believe business should be done. And it's hard sometimes to say what your values are without sounding a bit preachy or a bit, like you're trying to say that you're better than somebody else, which we're absolutely not. We're just saying that this is how we believe everybody can benefit if we all agree to do it the way that, and treat people the way that people should be treated, and think about the planet when we're doing. And actually, through joining Cheshire for Good with Donna about 3 months ago, it's really made us think about what we do and articulate it a bit better. And it's pushed us to do some of the things we've been thinking about forever. And I think one of the things that Donna pointed out as well is it's about looking at what you do, because it can seem overwhelming when you're looking at the ways that you can make your business better for people, planet. And actually, if you just look at what you do and the impact you make, and for us, we buy a lot of print for our clients. We bought 2.5 million envelopes the other day. That makes an impact on the planet. So we've brought in a structure where we now have signed up with ecology, and so we plant trees for everything that we print, and we found a way to kind of offset that. And also through our communications, we're choosing photos for our clients all the time, so we can make sure we choose diverse, inclusive images and sell our clients on using those, so that we can start to change how people are perceived visually. And especially working with charities, like you said, they already get that. That's already how they work. So our values already chime with them, but the businesses we work alongside and our kind of networking community and other local businesses, I think we can influence and encourage them through saying that we've signed up to the BBA, and through talking to them about it, and through Cheshire for Good. So that's our hope.
I wonder if I could just sort of take forward that point around kind of local networks, and I guess there's really something here about the importance of place. And Donna, I don't know whether you have any reflections on that. I mean, particularly given Cheshire for Good, but so I guess there's kind of two questions here. How important is place when it comes to doing business, to doing better business in kind of those local communities? But then secondly, why is Cheshire the place to start with this approach?
Yeah, and thank you, Joe. It's for mentioning Cheshire for Good, and actually our big, hairy, audacious goal, BHAG, to put Cheshire on the map for all the right reasons. Why is that important, Karen? And how does that connect to the Better Business Act? I was born in Chester. I've lived in Cheshire all my life, although worked in lots of different places. And it just struck me when I set up Cheshire for Good that, as you say, there are 1,000. There are 90,000 businesses in Cheshire. There are 4,000 charities. I've lived here a long time. I know a lot of them or are connected to them. As Caroline said, you know, the ripples of the one person we're connected to, knowing 7 other people, knowing 7 other people. And I just thought there is an opportunity for us to collaborate with other businesses in Cheshire to really help all of the businesses in Cheshire better understand and improve their impact. You know, when you've been on this planet quite some time, as I have, it's so blindingly obvious how much damage the old business rules, the old shareholder primacy capitalism has caused. You know, we're in a mess, aren't we? There is more inequality, and actually in Cheshire, there's huge amounts of inequality. Cheshire's perceived as this kind of footballers' wives county, leafy green, lovely, and it is leafy green and lovely, but boy, do we have some challenges. I was on a webinar only 2 days ago with Cheshire West and Chester Council. There are about 40,000 people in one half of the county currently affected by fuel poverty. I mean, that's incredible. There are 38,000 children living in poverty. You know, we've got a speaker coming to Cheshire for Good next week talking about food insecurity. We're in a mess, and actually you can extrapolate that out across the county, the country, and the globe. So business as a force for profit doesn't work, because what happens? That business leaders look where they can cut cost to maximize profit. What does that mean? Paying the least they can possibly pay to their workers, not caring a jot about their impact on environment, let alone communities. So the BBA says, actually, business as a force for good, business that considers its impact on its people, on communities, on the planet, as everybody on this call has said, well, why wouldn't you? And as it happens, and I know there is so much data to say, those businesses that do consider their impact on people and on planet, they outperform. Why? This isn't, you know, this is really simple stuff, and the BBA has consolidated it perfectly well. People want to work for, buy from, and partner with better businesses. You know, when I'm buying stuff, I don't buy a lot of stuff these days, but I'll buy from a B Corp, I'll buy from Innocent Drinks or Cook or Tony's Chocolonely, my very favorite B Corp for obvious reasons, but you know, or Patagonia or Finisterre, or it's just, I will buy from businesses I know are having a positive impact on their people and the planet. They're treating their people well, they're engaging in the community. So when the BBA came along, I was a huge B Corp fan anyway, obviously, as a B leader. But when the BBA came along, I thought, this is just such an obvious thing. Why aren't all 90,000 businesses in Cheshire saying, oh yes, why wouldn't we? It takes 5 minutes, in fact, less than 5 minutes, to support the coalition. And you can proudly wear the We Support the BBA Act logo. So why wouldn't you? And sometimes, and I know I've had this conversation / bang on about this a lot, but I know Caroline, Heather and Joe and I have said, you know, the minute I spoke to them about it, oh, it was 2 things. A, I've never heard of it, tell me more. And B, well, why wouldn't we? And so we want to collectively on this call share that message far and wide. And, you know, this is just obvious stuff. The old ways didn't work. They're causing us huge issues environmentally and societally. There is a better way. It's not difficult. Join us.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been in boardrooms, I've seen decisions being made around profit for shareholders, and it's very uncomfortable to watch when you're the PA taking the minutes, because you think, wow, that really does show that that business has been run for the profit of the shareholders. But there's shareholders in that room that challenge it, and that want to have a voice, and that want to make better decisions for their business. And this would give them that outlet to do so. Always calling back on the BBA, always saying, no, that's not how we do business anymore. This is how we are set up to do business. And that excites me so much, that there are those people that sitting around boardroom tables saying, no, I challenge that because I can, because this is in place now, and we've got to get there.
I think that's sorry, Donna.
Oh, sorry, just really quickly, I was just going to talk about people's fears and concerns. And one of the statements really I hear a lot, and it really needs addressing, and perhaps you're going to do this, Karam, is, yeah, we kind of get it, but it's not for us, not right now. We're firefighting. So having come through or going through the pandemic and the fallout from that, we just need to sort all of this other stuff. And what we really need collectively, and when I say collectively, you know, across the country, to help business leaders understand this isn't a either or, it's being more profitable because you're doing the right thing. But there is that sense of, oh God, we've got to do this and we've got to do that, and there's so much pressure. This isn't another thing to do, is it, Karam? It's the way you do business is more impactful, not just on people and planet, but on profit too. Absolutely.
I think, you know, the focus here is on boardroom decision making, isn't it? And as you say, it's about a new way of doing business. It's not kind of overly onerous. And remember, it is only the larger businesses that will have to report on how they do this exactly. So there's, you know, it's not about adding business whilst businesses are struggling with, you know, business rates and all the rest of it. And obviously there's a huge number of challenges. It's also about finding opportunities, I think. And, you know, if you actually start engaging with stakeholders, with your employees and all the rest of it, I think you'll find a whole range of solutions to problems that you've been having as well. That's one thing that we keep hearing, which I think is quite interesting. And then the second part of that is that you don't have to do anything right now, right? I think signing up to say that you want a level playing field for all businesses is quite a different thing than saying, I'm going to adopt all of this by myself right now. Clearly, if there was to be legislation, there'd be a whole host of guidance that would come with it, and there'd be a much broader cultural shift in society, and we'd all be learning at the same time. You know, as Heather and Caroline said, you know, the more responsible end of the business spectrum are doing this stuff anyway, and will be well prepared. But there's a question in the chat here from Mark about the level of parliamentary support. And actually, you know, at least to me, a change like this feels inevitable. So, you know, we might as well get out in front of it, and it makes sense to get out in front of it. I think the question around parliamentary support is really how soon it happens, and, you know, whether we have sufficient support to get it done this year. I mean, or not this year, but in the next parliamentary session. I mean, we're working on it, and that's definitely our objective. But I think undoubtedly something like this will happen in the next 5 years. You know, there's similar moves afoot in New Zealand, where they're looking again at directors' duties. There's similar moves in Europe at a European level as well. So the Commission is looking at sustainable corporate governance. So I've lost my train of thought, but I think that the point that I'm making is, yeah, get out in front of this stuff and don't get caught out by it. And actually, in doing so, it'll be beneficial, and, you know, you probably will grow more quickly, retain more staff, and all the rest of it. And I'm sure Heather and Caroline, you know, that's the point that you've kind of been making, and I'm sure that's the point that you make in your training.
Well, yeah, the evidence of like success or the evidence of change is a story. So you've got really nice messaging that you can share across all your stakeholders. You've got a way of talking to your current staff and those that you're recruiting. You know, what's the stat? Heather's great with numbers. The stat with around Gen X, they are
78%
of Generation X are demanding that a business is doing better business. For they don't want to work for a company unless they're doing a better business. Now, if you've got a skills gap in your industry and you're bringing young people up from, you know, school age, they ain't going to come and work for you if you haven't got a good business practice in place. And if you're transparent with it and it's, you know, it's accessible and you do show your better business badge and you do, you know, reference the things that you're doing as an organization.
I think what I really love about the BBA as well is it's about transparency and this holistic view on it. So rather than thinking, oh, if I make that commitment and in 18 months time I don't hit it, it's going to look awful. It's going to, can I brush it under the carpet? And it's like, no, we're teaching SMEs. If you have a target in place, that target might be, I'm just going to start to track it. You know, not necessarily it's going to reduce by 50%, 80% in 18 months time. Let's just start tracking it. And then in 18 months time, you can compare realistically how you can reduce. And it's all about just simply reducing what you're consuming and putting out into the environment. And it's just taking that first step. And if you don't hit that target, your consumers don't want misleading greenwashing, trying to, you know, push it under the carpet. It's about, well, we didn't hit it because X, Y, and Z. We had a pandemic. We had to furlough our staff. We couldn't hit that target. And that transparency creates loyalty and trust. And I think that's what the BBA is encompassing.
Yeah. And I think it also challenges them to look at their current position. And if a business is actually starting to look at their current position when it comes to everything that the BBA is about, it gives them an understanding of what they want to achieve going forward. So it isn't just sign the coalition, it's let's look at what you're doing now and let's create a better outcome for everybody in the future. 5 years is too long. Can you sort it out by May, please? It is.
If you've not got the Queen on speed dial, then go give her a ring.
she never picks up is the problem. But I think actually that point you make about kind of greenwashing is really interesting. And Joe, I mean, kind of working in branding, I mean that's an accusation that's leveled at so much at so many different brands. And clearly there's a lot of it out there and there's a lot of evidence of it happening. But equally, you know, it sort of feels unfair to tar everyone with the same brush. And I get a sense, you know, particularly from kind of Gen Z, is that consumers are more and more sophisticated. And what that means is that there's a lot more cynicism around this. So I think, Joe, I just wondered if you had any reflections on kind of greenwashing, whether you do feel that it is the case that consumers are getting more sophisticated.
Definitely. And I think, you know, any branding needs to be authentic. And that's the way we try and find out who a company is and then reflect that in how they look and what they say. There's no point a company creating this big, shiny green brand, because then as soon as somebody has an interaction with them, they'll realize it's not the case. You know, you can't trick people, you really can't. And then the reaction and the negativity that you'll get from that, you can't undo. Once you've tricked somebody once, you can do all the branding in the world. It's not going to change their mind about you. And, you know, we all know that people tell 7 people if they have a bad experience and 2 people if they have a good experience. So that kind of messaging gets out. And once it gets out, you know, your brand is what other people say about you. You can't control it. So you need to make sure that what you're doing and what you're saying are the same thing. Otherwise, you'll absolutely get caught out.
I think that's really interesting, that gap between say and do. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with Tortoise, but they're a kind of online publication, and they put together a sort of index that measures corporate responsibility commitments and then puts it up against you know, what they're actually doing. And often there's huge gaps. But equally, there's gaps between people that are doing stuff but not talking about it, which I think is quite interesting. And I think, you know, just to come back to this point about this being reflected in reporting, there's a real opportunity here to just actually, you know, when you know you have to file a report, you actually look through what your business is doing, and you realize that actually all these things that had sort of felt like discrete initiatives, you know, whether it was sponsoring a charity fund run or whatever, you know, something as little as that, all the way through to the fact that, you know, you have a great maternity leave policy. Actually, there's stories to be told, and I think often they're not told.
I think we all get busy. Sorry.
Always done it, so it's like, oh, that's just our normal business. But yeah, your normal business should be celebrated because you're still in business and you're still growing as a business and you're still employing locally. So let's tell that story.
Yeah,
sorry.
No, same thing. I think it helps you to prioritize it. You know, everybody gets caught up in the day to day, and especially when you've got clients and you're trying to keep them happy, you forget to talk about or prioritize what you're doing. But this has been a great opportunity for us to just take another look and work out all those things we've been talking about doing, actually prioritizing doing them, and then talking about it as well. Sorry, I'm going to sneak.
Oh, bless you.
Into the elbow.
Thank you. Yeah. I had finished.
Oh, you had finished. Oh,
yeah,
right.
sorry.
I just wondered with sort of, I think Poppy has just popped the responsibility index I was talking about into the chat.
Thank you, Pops.
But I just wondered with sort of 15 minutes or so remaining, whether there are any questions from the audience, because we're keen to get them involved, if they can sort of pop any questions into the chat. I think the other thing to mention around reporting is that it's such a emergent field. I think Mustafa has a question. Donna, I don't know whether it's best to pop questions into the chat or...
Yeah, please. I can't do it any other way, but yeah, Mustafa, if you'd be happy to pop your question in the Q&A or the chat, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
There was an earlier question from Amanda as well. I don't know if you spotted that one, Karen, at the very top.
Yeah, so Amanda asks about kind of engagement happening with charities and social enterprises. And it's worth saying that Social Enterprise UK, who are the kind of apex body for social enterprises, are a member of the coalition. And Social Enterprise UK have thousands and thousands of members. I can't remember the precise number now. So I think many of those organisations would sort of say, look, they're almost the original BBA, right? They're the kinds of organisations who've been doing this for years and years. I think what we're trying to do with the BBA is take the approach that social enterprises have taken, even community interest companies, co-ops and things, and mainstream that approach across the economy. So I think that's a really interesting question. Mustafa's question hasn't popped up yet, but no, certainly a really interesting question. Joe, I don't know whether you had any thoughts on that, given that you flagged it.
Well, I mean, I didn't know how it tied into the BBA, but yeah, as I say, I think most people are doing that anyway. I have a question. What's the best thing we can do as businesses, small businesses who've signed up to the BBA, to, you know, what do you want us to do to maybe tell others about it, or what would be our priority?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's two big objectives that we have as a coalition for the months ahead. I think one is we're at 850 members, would be delighted if we reached 1,000 by the end of the year. So yeah, if everyone on this call went and spoke to kind of 5 of their friends in business, you know, that'd be done. So that'd be amazing as a first step. I think secondly, as I mentioned, you know, ultimately this is a nice idea until we get enough MPs on board and convinced of it. And yeah, if you can go and talk to your local MP about this, then that's absolutely massive, because the more, and I think actually the thing is here is, you know, you can go in as an advocacy leader at a campaign and sort of say, look, I'd like to talk to X MP. That's fine, you know, you might get a meeting, but actually if you're a constituent and you employ X number of people in so-and-so's constituency, then they're going to take a meeting with you and they're going to listen to what you say. And actually you're going to be able to explain the reasons why you've signed up, why you believe in it, and why you think it's important that as your local MP, your representative goes and supports it in Parliament. So I think those are for me, the most important things.
If I was to do that with my MP, because that sounds quite daunting, but I'm up for it. What could I take, or what should I read beforehand just to make sure I know what I'm talking about?
Absolutely. So let me share. So we put together a whole host of materials and templates and things that go over everything from, writing that initial email, because many people, they've never written to their MP because they've never had anything to write to them about. So everything from that to what you could bring along when you go and meet them, and actually what the kind of outcomes you might be looking for are from a meeting. And there'll be particular asks which we can help you with, and I'm happy to kind of pick up via email. But obviously it will depend on who your MP is. If it so happens that they're the business secretary and they're the one who ultimately makes the decision on whether this becomes law or not, that's a very different ask to whether, they're a Plaid Cymru kind of backbencher. They're kind of different things. And I think the best way to do that is kind of basically a bespoke approach, and we can help and support with that. But so kind of steps 1 to 3, getting up and getting the meeting in the first place, I think it's fairly generic and there's templates. But then the final piece, kind of once you've actually got that meeting and what you're asking for, then we can certainly pick up and help with that.
I know, Karen, when I approached Edward Timpson, what's been really interesting about that, he's very supportive, but also he has connected with all MPs in Cheshire to say, I'm supporting the BBA, please join me in supporting, and definitely seeing some cross-party activity. This is an apolitical thing. This is about creating a cleaner, greener, fairer future in Cheshire and for the world. That's it. It's not complicated. And actually, just on that note, Mustafa's put a question in the chat, I can see. And it just reminds me, Mustafa, thank you for that I did a webinar a couple of days ago on with our local village about how can, as a village, we can improve as an environment. We can improve our impact on the environment. And the one phrase that really sticks in my mind is, the best thing we can all do as an individual is not to act as an individual. And I think this precisely, your question, Mustafa, you're connected to a number of networking groups. Absolutely spread this message far and wide. And if you're able to communicate, and we will be sending out by email a link to this recording, and obviously a link to the BBA, and there's a whole host of assets, a whole host of communication tools which make life very simple. Thank you, Karen, for doing that. But actually, if you as an individual can get that message out to another 20, 30, 50, 100 people and encourage them, because they know, like, and trust you, to support the coalition, and then 100 of them do the same, suddenly, we're at our 1,000 members by the end of the session, end of the day. And I honestly believe that if we all share what we've talked about and learnt today, and our passion for creating a cleaner, greener and fairer future, the Queen will be ringing us, Karen.
Yes, Donna.
I just want to be able to say, I need to open my eyes. I honestly, I work in an office with 3 other businesses. I constantly go into local independent shops who I've now become friends with. I've got a supply chain, I need to speak to them. There you go, there's probably about 100 businesses that I can say tomorrow, answer these questions. If you believe that you are part of this movement, sign the coalition. And it's really that simple. How many suppliers do we work with? How many customers do we have? How many suppliers do they use? It's got to build momentum, because 850 seems like a really small number. 1,000 feels like a really small number. If it was 50,000, it was 60,000, it becomes 100 really quickly. It becomes 200 really quickly, because once people start to say, oh, I want to be part of that.
Yeah, I think there's something really interesting there as well. And when we talk about kind of business groups as well, so, the Institute of Directors are on board, the UK's oldest business lobby group, and that sort of lends a huge amount of credibility to what we're doing. and they've got 30,000 members. So I think that's helpful. I think the other thing that we're really keen to do is that, so it's easy for government to kind of dismiss things, you know, and they love to, right? Because why change things? Because, you know, that's hard, right? So I think, you know, what we need to do is just build up more and more credibility. And yes, numbers give us that. But I think the other thing that lends us more credibility is if we can say, we talk for businesses right across the country. So I think, you know, admittedly, there is a concentration in cities. So there's huge numbers of supporters in London and Manchester and other large cities, Bristol. So it's great to be able to talk to Cheshire rather than just Chester. And I think that's really valuable. But I think the third thing is to say that we speak for the breadth of the economy. So, yeah, I think a lot of the brands that I showed on that slide earlier, you know, they're consumer brands. And yeah, okay, that's why I showed them to you, because you know who they are, you recognize them. But actually, if we can get more unexpected entities who aren't consumer-facing brands, but nonetheless are huge and meaningful, you know, if we can get hauliers and energy companies and all the rest of it, I think that will be really powerful. And it also means that you're talking to more and more bits of government. So I think that's one thing that we're really keen to do.
I think it would be really interesting as well to be more relatable as well to the SME community, because we find a lot of the time when we speak to our clients, they're saying, where's the proof? Like, who else is doing it? And I'm only a team of 5. And as you said, Ma and Pa businesses, and it's pulling them out and celebrating their success and the wins that they're having and the competitive advantage they're getting and the longer legacies that they're creating because they are putting this in place. Like, obviously, it's fantastic to see those big brands in there, but for an SME, they don't feel like they compare to them at all.
They don't belong with that.
They don't belong
group.
to it. So I think what we're doing in the Cheshire region is we're celebrating the success of these smaller businesses and the culture of responsibility that runs deep rooted throughout them, and saying, let's showcase our work, because there's so many of us.
Yeah.
And as a global, there's 90% of our global business population are SMEs. So as a collective, like, the change would be huge. So it's showcasing that small proportion, even though we're the largest proportion, if that makes sense.
Because what makes me excited, it's not just signing the act, it's the act of change as well. That for me is so exciting.
You know, I think Jo is spot on. To make a change, however small, and it's the same as we do in our own personal lives, isn't it? It's how can we make a difference? As a business, the difference you make affects a lot more people, and the bigger the business, the bigger the impact. But I think there is that really, all of those of us that support the Better Business Act, is to encourage people not to be overwhelmed. You know, it's like, whoa, but actually, you know, Jo, I love the fact that you're working with ecology to improve the environment every time, you know, you finish a new project or do a new project. And, you know, it's those really simple things. And Heather, you talked about, you know, actually stop using single-use plastic, for example. A, there's a cost saving there, and B, you're having an impact. But collectively, you know, there's so much more we can do. And something that I'm not sure if anybody has mentioned yet, but the template, when you do sign up to the coalition, to say, proud to support the Better Business Act, that we, as Ma and Pa businesses, as SMEs, as, you know, multinational conglomerates, all have that same logo. How proud do we feel to stand shoulder to shoulder with Innocent Drinks, IOD, Cook, you know, all these huge brands, and we've signed the same commitment and we have the same logo to say we are proud. There aren't many things, are there, where you can, you know, we're in that club, we're in this movement, we're part of it, whether you're a one-man band or you employ, you know, thousands and thousands of people. And I am genuinely really proud to be part of this coalition.
I think that's a really excellent point, Donna. And I think, the one thing that all businesses do have in common is that they have stakeholders, right? So no matter if you're Unilever or you're a corner shop, you'll have suppliers, you'll have employees. Well, you might not have employees, but you'll have suppliers, you'll have a local community and all the rest of it. So I think that's why the Better Business Act can bridge across all those businesses. So I think there's 5 million businesses in the UK, and BBA can kind of reach across all of those. I think what comes next is the more discrete initiatives, right? So the ecology or the living wage initiatives and stuff. And I think our feeling is that the Better Business Act, it basically changes the job description of directors to go from, look, try and make as much money as you can and extract as much money as you can from these stakeholders and give it to shareholders, to try and align and balance interests. And then that gives you a reason to go out and do the living wage stuff, to do the, get rid of single-use plastics in your supply chain. It gives you a reason to do all these discrete things that you might want to do. And obviously it will depend which is the right fit, depending on the size of your business, right? But hopefully it gives you a bit of a reason to do all of this stuff.